Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf. It's the beginning of September, 2nd of September to be precise, and that means it's time for my September TBR. And for those of you who might be new to the channel, TBR for my channel doesn't mean to be read, but to be released. So at the beginning of each month, I look at the new releases and pick 4 or 5 that I personally find interesting and talk about them with you. And this month I picked 4 books, well, actually 5, but the first book I only want to mention very briefly because it's Celeste Ng's new novel, Little Fires Everywhere, which will come out on September 12th. And I think everybody knows that Celeste Ng has a new novel coming out, so I don't want to spend much time on it. But if you are a fan of her previous novel and you missed it, her new book comes out mid-September, and it's about a woman living in the wealthy suburbs of Cleveland, somebody who plays by the rules, and then a young single mother, Mia, with her teenage daughter Pearl, move into the neighborhood, and everything takes off from there. There's something in Mia's past that our protagonist, the woman playing by the rule, wants to uncover. It sounds interesting, and even though I wasn't a huge fan of Celeste Ng's debut novel, Everything I Never Told You, I thought the characters were a little bit cliche the way they were portrayed. They stood for certain attitudes and much more than they were real people. But I still thought she was very talented, and I'm certainly going to read her next book. But for my September TBR, I only want to mention it very briefly. The next book I want to spend a little more time on, and that is Lily Tuck's new novel, Sisters, which will come out beginning of September on the 5th. If you've been following my channel for some time, you might remember that I read Lily Tuck's fictionalized memoir, The Double Life of Lily Yan, a couple of months ago, and I thought it was really good. And that was the first Lily Tuck I read, even though Lily Tuck is a well-known American novelist. She was born in 1938, by the way, and she won the National Book Award in 2004. But I hadn't read any of her books previously to the memoir. And now she has a new novel coming out, and I certainly want to read it. Sisters is about a marriage. We have an unnamed protagonist who is married to a divorced man with 2 children, and she is obsessed, or she becomes obsessed with the first wife. And so the second wife and the first wife are the sisters in the title. She tries to imagine the life with the first wife. She gets really obsessed about details. That's what I understand from the blurb. And it sounded like a very interesting psychological look into marriage. So Lily Tuck, Sisters, is one of the books that I'm looking forward to in September. And the next 2 books are nonfiction, because as you might remember if you're following my channel, I promised that I will put more attention to nonfiction. I read a lot of nonfiction, I just don't talk about it often enough. And the first one is not actually a new book, but it's a new edition, a new collection, and that is A Burst of Light by Audre Lorde. Now, Audre Lorde was a very well-known black feminist poet and activist. She died in 1992. She was born in New York, and A Burst of Light was already published earlier in 1988. It's her cancer journal, so her essays about her diagnosis, her treatment, her illness when she was diagnosed with breast cancer in the 1970s, I think, of the beginning of in the 1980s. And this is a new collection. There are interviews in there. There's a new introduction, and because I really love Audre Lorde, I want to buy this new book. So if you're interested in her, I will also link a YouTube video down below where she reads one of her poems. She's an absolute fascinating woman, or she was a fascinating woman. Unfortunately, she's dead. She died of liver cancer. And her essays, her poetry, but also her, her interviews, the way she thinks about feminism, about womanhood. They're absolutely fascinating. So I'm really looking forward to this new edition or new collection of some of her essays and interviews. And The Burst of Light in the new edition will come out beginning of September. And the second nonfiction book I want to talk to you about is a memoir, and that's Claire Tomalin's A Life of My Own, which will come out on the 7th of September. Now, for those of you who read biography, especially biography of English poets or writers, or Mary Wollstonecraft, Charles Dickens, people like that, then you will know Claire Tomalin, because she's one of the most famous English biographers. She was born in 1933 in England, and she has written biography all her adult life. And now she's written a memoir about her life as a biographer. And I thought that was really interesting. I really love her biographies. I think she's a very interesting person herself. And I'm curious to see how she, the memoir is called The Life of a Biographer. So I'm curious to learn more about how she reflects on her work. If you have lived with other people, so to say, for most of your life, because you write, she published a huge biography of Charles Dickens, and all the research that has to go into that, you really have to immerse yourself in somebody else's life. So I think that that's really interesting. And of course, for fans of Claire Tomalin, if you love her biography, I think this is a book you really you will really enjoy. So that's Claire Tomalin's A Life of My Own, will be published on the 7th of September. And the last book, of course, as always, is science fiction. And this time I picked Helen Sedgwick, The Growing Season. It will come out also on the 7th of September. Now, Helen Sedgwick is British author. She has published another sci-fi novel last year, The Comet Seekers, which I haven't read, so I don't know her books, but the premise of the Growing Season sounded really interesting. It's of course set in the future, and we have a biotech company called Full Life, and natural birth has been abolished. Instead, you have baby pouches, and everybody can have, safe birth. And there's Eva, who has campaigned all her life against the baby pouch, and she teams up with a journalist who also knows something about Full Life, something sinister. So I don't know. The story sounded interesting, and I always, me, I'm always into new science fiction, or at least for me new, because she has written a previous novel. If you have read her previous book, The Comet Seekers, let me know down below in the comments whether you liked it. But this was it for my September TBR, the new releases in September that I found interesting. Let me know whether any of the books that I've mentioned interest you as well, or whether you have a special book coming out in September that you want to recommend to me. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you soon in my next video. Bye-bye.